Chris Rutkowski. We're back at it. A lot has happened in the world of UFOs, and a lot has happened in the strange skies above us. And that's why I need to check in with you every couple months just to see, just to make sense of some of this stuff. But before we get into all of that, let me ask, how are you? What's new? What are you working on?
Hey, well, good to see you, Jordy. It's been a while.
It has.
What's going on? Well, I was just receiving the final proofs for my next book, which is due out in July. It's called Canada Confidential: Canadian Government Secret Files. And once again, I delve into the government files in Ottawa and other stuff for some of the cases that people have never heard of before, documents you've never seen before. And I'm going to be blowing the whistle on a few things. So that's
Interesting.
coming out.
That's a big promise. You're going to be blowing the whistle on a few things,
Yeah, yeah, I'm
because
naming names too.
you're
Yeah,
naming. Okay, well, I
naming
don't know
names.
how you find time for it, because I feel like every time we talk, you're either just released or just about to release a book. Where do you find time to like research and write, or is this just something you're always doing?
I'm always doing. Sleep is optional. You know that, Jordy.
That's true. That's right.
With
It's
all the
true.
shows you're doing, you never sleep.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm not writing books. Shows are easy because I just get to like, read a few things and then come here and talk about it. But when you're actually like digging up, documents from 50 years ago that the government tried to hide, and you're there naming names and organizing it in a way that all flows and makes sense, that seems like work to me.
Yeah, well, what's the old line? I can write reading, but I can't read writing, especially if it's writ rotten.
I like it. Well, we got a lot to get into tonight. What I've done is I've collected I what I think is probably most the two largest UFO stories from the past couple months in Canada, at least largest stories in terms of media attention. We're going to be
Hmm.
talking about an auction of UFO information, and we're going to be talking about a UFO sighting or a UFO incident that led to reports being received by, for one, but me through my website, but I think any UFO organization got a little got a flood of reports mid-August this past summer. So we got a lot to talk about. Why don't we start with the UFO auction, because this is the more
Okay,
recent of the two. And this is an
sure.
interesting one because this is something that I think you can relate to, because you had yourself a massive archive of UFO documents and books and videotapes and all this stuff that you ended up having to pass off. Tell me the story of your UFO archive. Where is that?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about this because there is a development in that. But
Okay.
back in 2017, I was asked by the University of Manitoba Archives and Special Collections if I was interested in donating my large collection of UFO materials, specifically some of the case files, government documents, the magazines, the books, everything. And so, in a bit of a negotiation, and I started, we signed the contract and I started shipping stuff over there, boxes and boxes and boxes. I had somewhere around 2,000 books.
Jeez.
It was something like 30 or 40,000 separate government documents and case files, just as many. So, it was quite a lot of stuff to schlep over there.
Mhm.
Um, and with the pandemic and everything, not a lot has been done with it. And there are other archives around. I mean, people in the Maritimes might be familiar with the Stan Friedman archives, which are held by the province of New Brunswick, but are actually at the University of New Brunswick.
Mhm.
And all of his stuff is there. There's also a collection in the University of Ottawa called the Arthur Bray Collection. Bray was a ufologist in the 60s and 70s, and he donated all of his stuff uh, to the university, and all of that stuff's there. And there's a few pockets here and there. Lots of stuff in the States. In fact, Rice University, which is in Houston, Texas, has a collection of Forteana anomalies. It's called the Archives of the Impossible, and they have UFO collections and Sasquatch and other cryptids and ghosts and all that sort of stuff. And of course, there's a UFO archive also down there, the National UFO Collection run by David Marler. So there's a lot of collections. So mine wasn't the first, but it was, fairly significant. But I just heard that the university is not going to be accepting all the books. At one point, they have really no room in their archives for books, and I had, like I say, 2,000 books. So they're actually returning all the books to me, and so I'm going to have 2,000 books about UFOs and paranormal and Fortean phenomena. And I wanted them to go into a library of all by themselves, so people can have this reference library. So right now I have no place to give this to. I'm willing to donate it if people are going to form a museum, or if a museum wants it or a library wants it. I'm
Hmm.
willing to do that. I have a couple of nibbles out since the word has got around that this material is out there. And a lot of them are rare books and stuff you've never seen before,
Oh
signed
yeah.
by the author and all this sort of stuff. So that's the latest on that.
Just
Um,
in case anyone's listening who has an interest in this sort of thing, they can contact me through my website, thecanadiangothic.com/contact, and I can put you in touch with Chris if someone has any legitimate reason for getting these books and using his time. So I'll put the call out to support that if anyone listening has an interest in that, because it's like it is worthwhile and important, and those are valuable because like nowadays 2025, most new stuff is on the internet, but you've been at this game a whole long time and you've been hoarding, collecting, whatever you want to call it, stuff since the very beginning. And so much of that stuff is not referenced online, let alone like scanned in high resolution for people to go through. And I think that's why these collections are so important. Like the having the physical archive, the physical books that, when these collections like yours and all the others you mentioned, if it weren't for people being able to access them, so much of this UFO story would have disappeared, or would be disappearing every day.
yeah, and a lot of this, as you mentioned, a lot of the stuff in this collection has not been scanned. As a
Mm.
matter of fact, a couple of the books that I had were purchased by a publishing company that wanted to reprint some of Bud Hopkins's books.
Okay.
Bud Hopkins, famous UFO author, because the original manuscripts and whatever had been lost, or I forget what happened, but they needed a clean, pristine copy of the book so they could scan those
Mm.
pages in. And so some of my books actually have become, you know, copies that are available and were reprinted. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff out there, and that's why this UFO auction is actually quite interesting.
Yeah, let me brief you a little bit on it, or brief the listeners a little bit on it, and then we'll listen to a little news clip about this. But we have a lot to say, I'm sure, about this one. A Vancouver liquidator is about to put out one of the largest UFO collections ever assembled for auction. It's the personal archive of California film and TV producer Chris Wyatt, who made a collection of UFO themed productions during the mid to late 90s. I'm going to play you a little bit of a clip about this, then we can talk about it. Here it comes.
So, what do you think? Is the truth in here somewhere?
If the truth was going to be anywhere, it might just be at this East Vancouver auction house. This room packed with memorabilia and artifacts, considered to be one of the most important UFO collections in the world.
The idea was to compile all of this and make a documentary.
There are hundreds of hours of interviews with everyone from astronauts to conspiracy theorists,
These are kind of neat.
Photos.
The little fighter planes chasing them.
along with secret government documents, all up for auction.
I wasn't expecting the scale of it.
Considered one of the best documented contacts.
The collection comes from Chris Wyatt, a TV producer, who is behind several alien and UFO documentaries. Much of the material revolves around Area 51 and the work done by Bob Lazar. Wyatt, in a phone call, says some of the material has never been seen before and is one of a kind.
One of the most unique pieces of the collection is the centerpiece. It's a yearbook from 1947 in Roswell.
According to the internet, the yearbooks from this era were confiscated by the US government.
Apparently the only one that's out in the public.
The conspiracy is that it was a cover-up. Others say it was done to protect people who were on base from unwanted attention.
They didn't want these people to be interviewed.
Whether you believe or not, to the right buyer, this material could be priceless.
The market's bigger than can be imagined. You Google UFO spaceships, there's all kinds of organizations. There's even a UFO religion.
Well, if there's a good thing,
Alien encounters and UFO sightings have made a comeback recently. A U.S. congressional hearing explored whether aliens exist,
there's a whole fleet of them.
and UFO sightings around the world are on the rise. Jeff Schwartz, the liquidator, says the material has stoked the interest of buyers from the U.S. to Germany and Japan.
Oh yeah, I'm getting all kinds of. I haven't had the green men come here or the men in black, but I've had just about everything else.
The lot going up for online auction December 13th.
So let's start with this. They proclaim that as one of the most important UFO archives of all time. I just want to start by asking you, do you think that's an exaggeration?
It's a little bit of hyperbole. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it is.
Okay. All right.
It's an interesting collection. They had actually contacted me directly several months ago for my opinion, and I wasn't as positive as they had expected, I don't think. Uh, like, for example, the magazines that they have, UFO magazines, Ideals UFO, a lot of that stuff has been scanned. I donated all of my magazines to the archives. There's copies around in used bookstores and whatever. You can find them. And they're going for auction. I think the pricing was like $20, $30
Mhm.
per issue or something like that.
Mhm.
A lot of the books, same sort of thing. The documents, well, they were secret at one time. They're not secret now. As a matter of fact, one of the documents that they listed and had photos of, it's freely available on the internet. It's been reproduced.
Mhm.
Even that yearbook that they talked about, somebody found a copy that's been scanned already. So, I mean, if you wanted a physical copy, I suppose, if you really wanted one, but the information is available. And I had actually mentioned to them that there are archives like, the ones I've mentioned already, where people have donated entire collections. So, they're trying to make some money. As for the videotapes, the interviews, if you're a real fan of Bob Lazar and Richard Hoagland and people like that, I mean, they do have tapes, videotapes. I think they're VHS, actually Betacam probably in a lot of cases because they're that old, which you couldn't play. Um, but these were used to supply clips for TV shows,
Mhm.
specifically from this guy's production company. The entire interviews, of course, have never been seen. So I suppose in that sense, they're very difficult and very rare. But because a lot of the stuff that's been claimed in some of these interviews has been proven false, or there's up for some controversy. Is it really that valuable? Maybe, but I don't know. I don't know anybody who would have the money for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I wonder what kind of money they're talking, or they'll end up getting, because, like, to me, this archive or this collection strikes me more as something that would go to a collector rather
Mhm.
than a researcher. Someone
Yeah,
may want this stuff. Like, I could see something like this doing okay if you put it all up on eBay separately, and
yeah.
UFO collectors would buy the old magazines and stuff. But I don't see it as something where, like, a researcher would want to gather this and display it in a museum. That's how it appears, at least to me. Do you get any estimation on what they're going to get for this? And are they selling it as a lot, or like like all together, or as individual items? Do you have any
Well,
idea?
you can look at their catalog online, and they are selling them individually. I think there is a way to buy it all at once, but I mean, there's some documents that they're asking hundreds of dollars for. And as I mentioned, some of this stuff, are already available
Yeah,
online. So I don't know why you'd buy that.
yeah.
Um,
I I'm
but
just I just have a thing when like, when it's something for profit within this world, the UFO world, I'm immediately like turned off. If this story was this film producer has donated all this stuff to, like, a university somewhere in Canada, or some museum or something like that, I would then be so much more interested. But when I hear, like, and they want to sell it, I'm immediately like, oh,
yeah,
one of those things.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been through that many times, but it'll be interesting to see, like, what comes of it. Myself, I like the idea of the old magazines and stuff. I would like to have a bunch of old UFO magazines from the 60s and 70s just to look at once and then sit it on a shelf and,
Hmm.
and own it. But I
Yep.
don't see it as something that a university would have a whole lot of interest in.
or yeah, or maybe there's like a billionaire somewhere who doesn't know what to do with his money or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
and it's only interesting. I'm not sure when people are going to be watching this, but it's public viewing for the first time on December the 12th.
okay.
And then the auction begins on December the 13th. And I think they're giving it a week or 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, this episode will be released while this is all available online. And in the description for this episode, there'll be links to where you can go and view this stuff. And if you want to
Mhm.
buy it, great. If you want to just look at it and roll your eyes at what they want for some of this stuff, that's great too. And if you want to buy me a UFO magazine, I like, 60s, 70s era. Is what I'd
Yeah,
be
yeah,
into.
some of those classics.
Yeah, but I do have a collection of UFO comic books from the 60s and 70s. I think you do as well, have some of those as well. They're really cool. But
Yeah.
how this is connected to Canada, because we're here talking about Canadian UFO news reports and updates. The way this ended up in Canada is that the owner of the auction house, they have a friend who knew Chris Wyatt. So it's just kind of like a friend of this guy who was a film producer that owned all this stuff, ended up getting this to an auction house in Vancouver. It's kind of strange that that would happen. You'd think there'd be a bigger market for this stuff in the United States. I'm surprised they brought it up here.
Yeah, I would think it would be easier to peddle in LA, for example.
Yeah.
Um,
Or to sell to other, like there's a lot of people who are making UFO documentaries and TV shows. It seems like it would be the easiest thing would be just to sell it to someone like that to, here's all the footage and everything, go nuts.
Yeah, although as I mentioned, the footage, a lot of that is going to be not just on VHS but on beta, and usually not just beta, but um, a format called Beta X or something like that, which is a commercial beta. Which, if you have an old beta machine at home, you couldn't even play these things.
Yeah.
So there are some caveats.
Yeah. Let's move away from a UFO archive and get to the good stuff. A UFO sighting that got Canadians talking, that got the UFO reporting lines like the one that I have on my website blowing up. We'll take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk about August 12th and the strange thing that many Canadians saw in the sky that night. An ad break will happen during the podcast.
That made me think of something.
You look like you still got quite a collection.
You mentioned the UFO.
Oh yeah, that's
comic book. This is they put out the whole, they bound
compendium
them all
or
together.
whatever. Is that new?
No, this is the UFO comic book.
Yeah,
they bound it all together.
Yeah, I have. I think I have all the individual issues, but they call that in the comic book world a compendium, like the full collection.
Compendium.
Yeah. Is there a date on when that was published?
Yeah. From 68 to 78.
Yeah. Is that an original like collection from back then, or was this something they reprinted recently?
No, this is the original collection from back then.
Okay, I didn't know. Oh yeah, I see the price on it, $1.99.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. I have the individual comics. There's a section within those where people could write in a UFO. Yeah, there's Shag Harbor, right?
Yeah.
There's a section in the comics where people could write in their UFO sighting, and the comic book would illustrate it. And there's one from Membertou. I think it's Membertou in Cape Breton, a native reservation in Cape Breton, a Mi'kmaq reservation, which is right next to where I grew up. I was just flipping through it and saw that, and I took a photo of it and sent it to friends that I have that live there, and they knew nothing about it. It was kind of cool.
And of course, there's even a separate Herman compilation, just Herman with aliens.
Nice. That's the stuff. This is the stuff the university that you sent all the books to was not.
Yeah, they didn't want that for sure.
Yeah. Just before we get back to the show, I wonder if Shag Harbor's museum would have any interest in that sort of thing. I guess they don't really get into books.
Yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't be collecting, and it would be for research, and who would visit them, right?
Yeah, they would be, I guess, like if you had like posters or something, they'd put it up. But it'd be hard to find somewhere to take a big and it would also cost a pretty penny to ship that kind of thing, I bet.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Shipping is nuts when, especially with books. In the US, they have a separate rates for shipping books. That makes it a lot cheaper. Here in Canada, it's only done by weight, so you pay a fortune.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back into it here. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one, Chris, and I'm excited to get your take on this. I think we have an obvious explanation, but this is definitely one of those times where, Facebook groups and UFO watchers were blowing up with what they expected to be possibly the next big thing. This is again occurred on the evening of August 12th. Stargazers from Quebec to Nova Scotia were expecting a meteor shower, but many instead found themselves staring at a brilliant, swirling ball of light drifting mysteriously across the night sky. I'll play you some news reports I'll play you a piece of a news report covering what many people saw that night.
A mysterious glow in the night sky.
Right over there, I could see the Big Dipper in the background, actually.
Oktay Udatan lucky enough to see it.
It looked like a white light, and it had like a spirals, and it was slowly moving.
He noticed an unusual bow tie looking white object Tuesday night while taking out the trash.
I said, let's look at the sky. Maybe I'll catch a few meteorite because of the meteor season. So I looked at the sky, and I saw this very uncommon light ball.
He then got his son.
He said, come outside, there's something in the sky. I was like, okay, maybe it's like a planet or northern lights.
Good guesses, but no.
So I went on my phone, I was like, spiral objects in the sky tonight, and nothing really made sense. And then I saw there was something about a SpaceX rocket.
Space experts say it was a piece of a rocket, the spent stage, rarely seen, but actually happens often.
As far as rocketry goes, it was a routine maneuver, yes. Just aligned in just the right way for us to see it here in Ottawa.
Sarah Watson saw it too from her balcony.
I was just in awe, and it was so beautiful. So I was like really struck by just how pretty it was. I'm like, lots of stuff from space is gorgeous when you see it through a telescope, but looking at it with the naked eye, this was something completely brand new.
So this was an interesting one, and I say there that before we started that clip, a lot of UFO organizations received UFO reports related to this event. Through my website, people can submit reports, and I think I got 5 or 6 the morning after, several of which included photos and videos of the object. And to describe it, I guess I would, much like they did in that news clip, is it was like almost like a ball of light with a sort of spiral kind of almost like spiraling wings kind of off of the side of it. It had this strange kind of almost hourglass shape that was spiraling around the circle or something. But anyway, we heard in the clip there that a lot of people were shocked and in awe by the sight of this in the sky, but it seems like there is an explanation. I'll let you explain it better.
Well, sure. And, it was spectacular. It was seen over a large chunk of the eastern part of North America, not just in the Maritimes, but in Quebec, down in the United States. And it did look kind of like you imagine a galaxy looks like, with the spiral arms, about the size of the full moon. And, definitely something unusual. And it's not necessarily a simple explanation. And the guy had said they're fairly common. Well, they're not that common in that sense. But what happened was there was a launch of the Ariane rocket that was carrying some satellites into orbit. And when the first stage and the second stage separate, the lower part, which had actually boosted the satellite into orbit, falls back to Earth, and there's still some fuel left in there, and they let it go. And what happens? It spins around, and the fuel will actually be visible, and that's what you saw. And so we do hear about those from time to time. August the 12th of this year was pretty spectacular. Interestingly enough, on December the 3rd, something very similar was seen, this part over the central part of North America, over Manitoba and into North Dakota and Minnesota. This time it's a little trickier because the same type of thing was seen, this little spiral hourglass cloud, and it did correspond with the launch of a Chinese rocket, but one of the stages failed to cooperate all that well. But what's interesting is that when we tried to track down the coordinates and the orbit trajectory of this, it didn't match exactly, because it turns out that some of the information about the launch of this was classified secret. So we actually
Oh,
couldn't verify 100% that that's what this was, although it sure looked exactly like what it was, and there was a launch around the same time, but the trajectory information wasn't matching, because it seems that there's some proprietary stuff on half of the Chinese, and the Americans were considering it secret, so they didn't have all the information. So we're thinking that's what it was, but technically it's a UFO.
okay. And how did you find out about it? Because this was just a little over a week ago. How do you find out about something like this happening? You yourself? Is it people sending you reports, or like how did you learn about this? Because
Well,
I hadn't heard anything about it.
I did have a report that was sent to me, a photo. There was a photo of it that was made available, and that's how we realized it was the same thing. Photos of it were sent to astronomy groups. There are a lot of observers who were looking for the late Taurids and the early Geminid meteors, same sort of thing as the Perseids with the one on August 12th. And so the astronomers tracked this down. There's some very, very keen astronomers who are able to, get into the satellite databases and track these things down. And a lot of the information is available. There's actually some sites online called rocket launches, and you can go to those, and they actually list all the rocket launches,
Cool.
not just Starlink, but a lot of the other ones. And you can try to match them up. And if you have the right software, you can plot them on your computer, so you can figure all that sort of stuff out. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is it's if you know how to do it, it's fairly easy. But for the average person, it looks pretty weird. And this one was pretty weird.
Yeah, and that's what I find so fun about this is someone like to a layman, you can see this amazing, miraculous thing in the sky, but then as it gets, as the story gets told and the evidence gets pushed along, eventually someone who is able to kind of like organize it and weigh it against like these, databases of rocket launches and stuff. I always find it interesting to hear the solutions. This one was solved pretty quick. I received myself, like I said, probably like 4 or 5 different reports about this, and I think, by the time I even looked at them, there was already articles with an explanation that kind of made sense. But
Yeah, I think I have. We're in the process of putting together the 2025 Canadian UFO survey, and I've been starting to input some of the cases, and I think we probably have 30 or 35 separate observations of this thing reported as a UFO.
yeah.
But there's an interesting lesson here.
Hmm.
The fact is that you had all these people reporting a UFO that we could explain, but there's lots of other cases that, where we have many witnesses to something that we weren't able to hammer out, and we weren't able to figure out. So if a person's seeing explanation, obviously this thing existed. So if a person reports something, let's say a disc or a tic tac or whatever, you know, there was probably a stimulus or something to be seen that caused that person to see it. So it actually, cases like this one, where we have a lot of witnesses and an explanation, sort of add fuel to the fire that when a person reports a UFO, there probably was something there, and it wasn't part of people's imagination and hoaxes and all this sort of stuff. So it's actually good for ufology to have cases like this.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Well, speaking of those cases that may not be that easy to explain, we can get into a few of them here, because something I like to do when I have you on the show is take some UFO reports that listeners and followers of the Canadian Gothic have submitted and play them to an actual expert. Very few people get their UFO sighting into the ear of someone like you. And I'm going to bring it direct here. I have a few different ones to bring up with you. The first one will be actually just a few days after what we just discussed. This is a report we received the early morning hours of August 16th this past summer. It's a fellow named Robert who saw something in the sky above Gabriela, British Columbia. Let's listen to him tell the story.
Hello, I'm in Gabriola, BC, just looking up in the southern sky, and there's a strange object roughly round that shifts to out of round and back again with multiple points of light. I just looked up this morning and thought all the stars would be gone and saw that. And it's quite strange. Yeah, at about 6:15 a.m. And thank you. Bye.
So he submitted that through my website, basically saying like, do you have any explanation for what I'm seeing? He was sending it in as if we could go and do an investigation. We can't go out to Gabriella, BC and solve this one, but maybe you can have an idea. Although there's not a lot of information there. Do you have any idea on what that may have been?
Yeah, I don't understand. I've been to Gabriella Island. It's actually quite nice out there. But you know, these stars that were moving, or you know,
He described it as he goes out and it must have been just as the sun was rising, because the stars seemed to be just visible or not quite visible because it was getting too bright, and he
yeah,
saw this object that the way he described it seemed to have multiple points of light and were
yeah,
kind of changing shape. So initially, like when I get a UFO report, the first thing I'm thinking of is like the Starlink, which is like the series of
yeah,
dots, just because
yeah,
that's the most common. So when I hear a UFO report, that's the first thing I'm thinking. Is this just Starlink again? This clearly
yeah,
isn't, because he seems to describe it as more of a circular kind of pattern. But
yeah. I don't know what that might be. Just from the little bit of information that he had, I don't have an explanation for that. We just don't have enough information to form any kind of explanation.
so aliens.
Yeah, yeah, alien, yeah.
But what do like someone like this who sees something, what information can they provide? Should they do so that an explanation can be given, or
Sure.
at least get you on the road to that? Like what
Well,
would
he
you?
had the time, which was really useful. He had the time right, which is good. The direction that he was looking
Mm,
would be useful. Um, and I mean, it's too bad he didn't have a camera or whatever. That would be
yeah.
useful too. Sometimes people submit drawings,
Mhm.
which are pretty useful too. So if you don't have your camera or your phone out, even after it's gone, maybe grab a pen or a pencil or something and draw what you saw. Was it over the mountains? Was it over the sea? How high up was it? Can you estimate how high it was,
Mm.
and all that? And these different points of light, were they moving as one? I mean, it's very possible. We did actually have a couple of cases this year where flocks of birds were actually seen, and if they're illuminated from below, they can look like points of light moving, together in a pattern or something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's the drawing. Like people may roll their eyes at the thought of like submitting a drawing, but what I find is that it's so hard. Like when you see something amazing or incredible, it's really hard to put it into words. And sometimes
Mhm.
just to draw it, it even just adds to your verbal explanation and description. You're like, oh, I see what you're talking about. So the
Yeah,
idea
the
of
most
submitting a drawing isn't as crazy as it may sound to some
No,
people.
as a matter of fact, the most remarkable thing, I had a fellow walk into my office with a canvas, a complete painting that was like 3 feet wide, because he was a natural, like he did paintings of natural scenes, landscapes and whatever. And he had seen this. He was driving on the highway and saw this disc-shaped thing fly right over the highway and then settle onto a field and then took off again. And it impressed him so much, he actually painted a landscape of this particular thing and gave me the painting.
I like that. Well, I
And
guess
when and that would take. He said it took him a couple of hours. So, wow.
yeah, well, and art is a way to express yourself, and if you're trying to express an explanation for what you saw, maybe grab a canvas and some paint and make it
That's
happen if
right.
that's
Yeah,
what it takes. And one way to get a UFO researcher to take you seriously is to
yeah,
bring them a painting
absolutely.
to their office. We have a few more UFO sightings, and then the next one I want to get into is a really weird one. It includes a photo. I'm gonna, people watching our live stream now, I'm gonna have the photo on the screen. But for people listening to the podcast that want to see this photo, I'm going to post it on the Canadian Gothics Facebook page, and I'll also have a link to it in this episode's description so you can see it. But this is an interesting one. let's take our final break, and when we get back, we'll hear about what I'll simply describe as the perfect burnt circle in Elmvale, Ontario, after a short break. Did I send this circle? Did I send you this before? I think I may
I'm
have.
not sure. Let me take a look. Elmvale?
Elmvale.
Elmvale or Elmville?
Elmvalle. And this was one where I'll explain it better in a minute, but she sent me a voicemail and emailed me the photo, and she's like, "This is at my mom's house. You know, we don't know what it is. We want an explanation." And she wasn't screwing with me or anything. I could tell it was sincere and genuine. But I wrote her back an email, didn't hear back. Maybe a month later, I wrote her again, didn't hear back. And then I wrote her earlier this week, still hadn't heard back. But it's really interesting.
No, you didn't send that one to me. I'm looking through it. I haven't found it.
Okay, the photo. All right, it's let me just send you the photo.
I'll see it on your site. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mean like we'll talk about it in a minute.
After the fact. Oh, you want to show me now? Yeah.
I'll send it to you just so you can see it.
How are you sending it? Messenger or email?
Yeah, if I send it through Messenger, is that okay?
Yeah, that's quick. Yeah.
Okay, one sec. I'm just going to take a picture of the picture on my screen just so I can do it really fast. Okay, incoming. All right.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I'll bring us back from break, and then we'll get into this one.
Oh, interesting.
All right, Chris, I'm really excited to get into this one. This is a UFO report that I received, and it was another like kind of plea for help. It was someone who saw something incredible in their mother's backyard, and it seems like they had nowhere else to turn to except you and I. And they sent a photo and a voicemail explaining the photo. And let me just play the voicemail, and then we'll get into what may be going on here. This is Tanya in Elmvale, Ontario, describing the perfect burnt circle. Oh, I said Elmvale. I think it may be Elmwood, but let's listen to her say it.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Paulus. I visit my mom in Elmvale at least once a week, and I noticed this large, round, burnt, perfect circle in her backyard in Elmvale, Ontario, Canada, and I took a picture. My mom did not know that she had it in her backyard, so we don't know if it was Wednesday night, made by Wednesday night, and nobody has been out there touching the grass. My mom lives alone by herself, and I find it quite odd that it is a perfectly round, burnt circle of grass in her backyard. And we need this to be taken a look at. We find it quite scary and exhilarating all at the same time.
Now, I will say, I reached out to her multiple times to try to get more information, and I haven't been able to reach her. But I think in that voicemail, that doesn't seem like someone pulling our legs. And the photo is clearly a circle of upset, irritated grass. And it seems to be almost like behind the fence line or something. It looks like it's a photo taken from maybe someone's back door or something. You see where there's like a fence, and then on the other side of the fence, where the grass is all green, there is just a perfect circle of like dead grass. And they reported this through a UFO reporting tool. So I think they're leaning towards a supernatural explanation.
Well, yeah, and it is interesting. It does look like it's, maybe even not her yard, but the yard on the other side, or field on the other side. We haven't had these are sometimes called landing rings. We haven't had a case like that in many, many years. I know organizations like MUFON, they actually train their field investigators to how to sample, soil and things like that, and grasses. Um, and yeah, if we had got out to the site, and we had more information about when this was found and where exactly it was found, and interviewed people in the area, if it was fully investigated, I say this was a pretty good case. But having very little information and just having this one photo, hard to go on. There
Yeah.
have been cases like this where it turned out that people had, they had a trampoline set up, and the round part that it sits on has done stuff like that. We've had cases where people had done with their go-karts and whatever, around and around, that type of thing. This doesn't seem to be any one of those. Hard to tell. But we have had cases like that in Canada. Crop circles used to be the big thing back in the 80s into the 90s. And a lot of them looked exactly like that. Whether the grass was burned or simply dead or discolored from having something on top of it, hard to tell. Canada actually started the crop circle craze back in 1967 in Duhamel, Alberta, which was actually investigated by the Canadian military. And after that point, we heard more about crop circles in England in the 80s and into the 90s. In fact, today, there still are reports coming in, and photos of really elaborate designs found in wheat and other grains in England. So, the phenomenon keeps on going. And, we had obviously something was seen in Canada, but we just don't have enough information.
Yeah, very rarely do I get an email about a UFO sighting or UFO report where I'm like, I would like to go and get my elbows into this one and figure it out. This is one I would want to. I would love to get closer up photos of the depression or the damage to see, like, is it burnt or is it dead grass? Like you said, and if it's burnt, was it heat or chemical? Because I've I put too much lime on my lawn one time trying to fertilize it.
Yeah.
I
Fertilizer burns.
Yeah, I didn't make a
fertilizer burns
perfect
look like
circle.
that.
I just made a whole bunch of brown spots, but it sort of looked like this. When I look at the photo that she sent, what it looks like to me is what you would imagine if, let's say, if you tied your dog up in the center of a field, like if you had something like a stake in the ground and your dog was tied to it, and the dog had a 10-foot kind of parameter it could run in a circle around. It kind of looks like something like that.
Kind
It
of looked
looks
like that.
like
Yeah.
a path.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if she took the time to call and send the photo and stuff, the mother would know. Her mother would know if there was a dog running there in a circle for the last, week or whatever it would take to make this
Yeah.
hole.
What was the date of that? What date was that submitted?
We received that in mid-July. I don't know the exact date, but it was mid-July. But the way it was described is it seemed to them that it wasn't there one day and it was there the next day. But it looks to be in an area that they wouldn't be frequenting. It's kind of, like I said, sort of behind a sort of like a fenced off area. So it could have been there a few days. But it's really interesting. It really upsets me, though, that they would take the time to send it, but not be able to elaborate further. And who knows, maybe the government is preventing us from getting to the bottom of
That's
this.
right. Yeah, they got to her. That's why she's not getting back to you.
Yeah.
However, if anybody is watching this and listening, and you're in the Elmvale, Ontario area, maybe you can figure out where this is and then get in touch with Jordy.
Yeah, I would
Jordan,
like
yeah.
to learn more. Let's move on to the final UFO report that I have for you, and maybe you have some to share at the end, but this is one I actually just got very recently, probably in the last 2 or 3 days, but it's a historic report. It's coming from Glen Valley Regional Park in BC. It's a listener named James who saw something in September of 2017. He sent me both a audio recording of what he saw and a text version. I'll play you the audio recording.
I was hanging out with some friends in Glen Valley Regional Park, and it was in the late 2010s. And I remember they'd gone off to...
Let me fix that. It was historic report, September of 2010. Okay, here it goes.
I was hanging out with some friends in Glen Valley Regional Park, and it was in the late 2010s. And I remember they'd gone off to do something, and I had to use the bathroom, so I broken off with them. I remember standing there in the bushes, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye just behind the trees. And I remember thinking, that's a big thing to be up there. And I remember looking up, and I saw this massive triangular object, and it had a light on each of the points. And as I'm watching it, it's completely silent, and it was moving very slowly. And I had this weird feeling that it felt like it knew that I was looking at it. And as soon as it sort of noticed that, more light started to appear on the underside of it, almost to mimic the stars behind it. And it sort of dissolved away and disappeared. I was like, okay, that just happened. That's kind of cool.
What do you make of that one? He says in 2010s, would triangular craft have been in vogue in that period? Because I know there was a period of time when triangular craft were all the rage.
Yeah, triangles were really from the 90s, from the X-Files era, but we still do get these reports of objects with lights on 3 points, and especially the fact that he saw these additional lights sort of on the body or in the body. We still do get cases like that. Again, it would have been interesting to, have heard about it sooner rather than later, because it would have been possible maybe to find additional witnesses and maybe check with the flight aware or whatever. Maybe there was some strange helicopter action or something going on. Hard to tell, but it is the type of thing that we continually hear. In fact, that description matches some of the reports that are being popularized right now. There's a film that's coming out, Age of Disclosure. Some people actually have probably seen it already, where you have all these people from the intelligence community or former intelligence officers and former military personnel who say that they were told that there is a cover-up, that the government really does have these craft and they're flying them, and some are triangular and some are this and some are that. That is in the public eye and mind right now, and so the shape is consistent with what we're hearing in the UFO literature from pop ufology right now. So it is very similar to what we've heard of.
But what could it be if we're going to take it at face value, and he's there and he sees a large triangle like peeking up above the tree line? My only thought could be something like, depending on how bright the sky is or something, like when it's getting dark out, a cloud can really look strange in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But of
Yeah.
course, a cloud's not a triangle, but it may be triangular.
Well, and any three lights, by definition, form a triangle. So they could be three distant stars that, and if depending on how dark the sky is, it could look like these three lights are on the points of a large dark triangle, because you wouldn't be able to see what was really in the center, other than your mind sort of fills it in for you. So that is one possible explanation. And the other part about the other stars seen in the middle, well, if this triangular object was really large, you might be able to see additional stars between the three lights. So
Yeah.
it's possible that we're talking about some sort of star formation. But
Yeah.
we'd have to know what direction he was looking, and did he see any stars as well as this object?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's but yeah, it's just, I guess it just shows that if you look at the sky at night, the light can play tricks on your eyes, and your eyes can play tricks in your mind, and
Yeah.
maybe you're seeing something, or maybe your brain is just filling in some blanks.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Do you any recent reports that you received yourself that you think are, going to create a buzz or are interesting in any way that you want to share?
Well, I've got one from out near you, actually. From October the 3rd, quite early in the morning, something like 2 o'clock in the morning, Halifax Airport.
Okay.
And I'll read you. This comes from a Transport Canada CADORS report.
Just
and it
explain
says,
explain what that is, the Transport Canada CADORS report.
It's civil aviation, a reporting system of incidents. And pilots usually report these things, and we have a lot of UFO reports that pilots have seen. And so they file them under the Civil Aviation Daily Reporting System incident. And this is one from October the 3rd that Transport Canada has made available. And it says on that day around 2 o'clock, 8:50. So let's say 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. As a Cargo Jet Airways Boeing from Halifax to another spot in the Maritimes was rolling, again, as it's rolling on the runway, a target crossed runway 23 and appeared to collide with the aircraft, according to the radar that was in operation at the time. There was no reported traffic. Halifax International Airport Authority was advised and inspected the runway. Nothing was found. So just to set the pace again, so this cargo jet plane is rolling on the runway, either coming in or leaving. And all of a sudden, as they're watching, and there's a system called the Surface Movement Guidance and Control System, which is a series of radars and sensors that monitor activity on runways. That's always on. And somebody in the control center saw, and it said appear, they saw a target, so something crossed the runway and appeared to collide with the aircraft. Now, not physically, apparently, but on the radar, at least, it seemed to merge or hit the aircraft.
Weird. Okay. So it sounds like we're describing a ghost here.
Or something, certainly something a bit out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. But, and where does that go? Like, surely with, aircraft safety and all this stuff, someone's going to look into this. Or are
well,
they
this
not?
was looked into by NAV Canada and Transport Canada. And unfortunately, we only get snippets. NAV Canada being a non-governmental office, you actually can't file an access to information or a freedom of information request for them. So we don't actually know what they did about it. We don't even know the pilot's name. We don't know the airport traffic controller at the time. So we don't have enough information. Again, we do know that something weird happened, and not just, so-and-so said. We have this document that says this actually occurred at the Halifax airport on October 3rd.
Wow. But I guess it could be, a problem with the whatever radar kind of tool would have picked this thing up. It could have been a problem with that. It could have been someone seeing something that, appeared to collide with the plane and didn't. I guess you have no way to know. People talk a lot about, this idea of like, cover-ups in the UFO world. If there is a cover-up, the cover-up seems to just be simply the amount of bureaucracy that surrounds like airplanes and satellites and the different countries sharing information with each other. Like that always seems to be the roadblock. You told the story earlier about the Chinese aircraft or whatever. It's, who knows what they were doing up there, but the Chinese government is not going to open their, computers and show the Canadian or American government what was going on. And in this case,
and even the American government. As a matter of fact, I was just reading something today. It was I forget it was a quote by somebody who's talking about the cover-ups and whatnot, and the consensus wasn't a cover-up, but that it's more of a cover-up that they don't really know what's going on. There's either some incompetence, or somebody pushed the wrong button, or they don't know what's going on either. So the cover-up is they want to, they can't admit that the government doesn't know what's going on. So they sort of tease out that they do know what's going on and classify it as secret.
Yeah, like faking a cover up, just
like
as a way to be
we know what that
overconfident.
is. We know what it is.
We're
Not a
not gonna
problem.
tell you. Oh, yeah, I like that. All right, well, this has been interesting. I think we got to do something like this, like once a month or so. Compile like whatever the month's interesting UFO stories, gather a little collection of UFO reports, and do one of these kind of monthly breakdowns. And me saying that is my call out to the listeners. If you saw something in the sky, first thing you should do is go to thecanadiangothic.com/contact and tell Chris and I about it, because we'll air it on the show, and I'll get an expert to weigh in, an expert named Chris Rakowski. And they don't get any better than that.
Yeah, and if you really think this is a great idea and want us to continue once a month or something like that, let us know. Let us know, if this is a great idea and you want to know more.
I like that. Well, let's put a bow on it for tonight, Chris. This is always amazing talking with you. Always incredible. Always interesting. I learn something every time, and I always get excited for a new book because you always have one on the back burner.
That's right.
I'm excited. Tell me again, when's your next book out?
The publishing date is supposed to be July of 2026, and you'll be hearing more about it in the coming months for sure.
And music is just going to fade in. I'll thank you like off air, and I'll introduce you at the beginning, so it'll all work out. But this is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jordan. Keep up the great work. We were always listening to your podcast when we're driving around. So
well, I'm always busy and always.
And I want to know where those kids are.
I'm still trying to figure that out. It's no new news with that. It's pretty surprising, that that can go on this long. And
Yeah, very weird, very weird.
yeah, it is pretty disturbing. But all right, well, I'm going to end our stream here. Anyone who's watching, thank you, and we'll be back again soon, probably within a month or so. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right.